Next thing I want to tackle is this interior soffit. And that interior soffit drops because of this beam. So if we think about this, our second floor is offset 3/4 of an inch. There's the top of my subfloor. There's the top of my joist, offset 11.25 inches for my 2x12. There's that, and then this should be a 1/2 of an inch for my ceiling. Yep. Now, if this is the bottom of my joist, this joist has to bear on something. Because, if I'm standing here, my load is going down into the plywood or into the subfloor, which is then being transferred to the joist, and the loads are being transferred to the ends of the joist. Well, I have a big opening here. What's that joist resting on? It's resting on a beam. So if you look at this in plan, my joists are running this way. Here, let me show you. Actually, I have a framing plan down here. My joists are running horizontally across that main mass of my building, right? So this opening here, these joists have to rest on something. Something has to carry those joists, and that is done in this case by a big LVL beam. And if you look at our final deliverable, you'll see that here. There's a big old LVL right here for all those joists to come in, and it carries the load of the floor, and it carries the load of this wall, which this wall carries the load of the roof above. So that's a lot of loads coming down into this LVL. It is 5.5 inches thick, so it's the same thickness as our wall, so it's in line with our stud wall. And the top of it is at 9'1" 1/4", or the underside of our joist. So we just drew that in here, right? The underside of our joist. So our beam is 16 inches deep. Now, this is my upstairs wall. Well, why copy, or why draw? I got that backwards. Why draw when you can copy? And I'm just going to copy all of that stuff for now. Let's see. So interior face of the wall to finished floors right there. So interior face of the wall to finished floors right there. Now I can delete this line. Don't need it. I think I've got an extra. Yep, got an extra line in there. Let's clean that up. And get rid of this because that's probably going to change size. Now, the other thing that we did was we just cut this off so you don't have to do the rest of this section. So I can copy that break line, and I'm just going to do 2-point mid somewhere. Let's see, is that enough? Probably. I might have it a little low. Let me move it up a little bit. Trim all that. Copy this break line somewhere up here. How did I do that? Did I make those line up? I did. Look at that. I did a better job in my original. So if I'm coming over to there, let's actually come back a little bit. And then we can stretch all this to line up with that break line. That makes for a neater drawing. Now we can trim all of this back to there. So here was the bottom of our beam, and our beam fits within our 5.5 inch wall. So for now, I'm just going to drag this line down using the handles. So there's our beam. And now on the face of that beam, we're going to put gypsum wallboard, and then the bottom of that beam offset, we're going to do gypsum wallboard. So here's our 1/2 inch of gypsum wallboard there and there. That runs until it hits this gypsum wallboard. And I've got this line here. And then this line, like I said earlier, would be, let's trim that one back to there. This line's actually going to be seen in elevation because that's the, we're seeing the profile of our next stud, right? And Then we're going to have our 3.5 inch or 2x4 framing. So across our wall, we're going to put some, basically what I would call a ledger. So, oops, that's not the right offset. 1.5 inches. We'll do it that way. So again, actually this is cavity. So that goes up to there. This comes up to there. That gets green. Because we're cutting through this as it gets fastened to our stud wall. So we'll put in our, again, that's a 2x4 piece of dimensional lumber. It gets our hatch. My layers are really slowing down. All right, then this becomes cavity. So right now I'm doing my line weights as I go. So that becomes cavity. So you can kind of see the outline of this cavity in here. It's like our roof sheathing, the back side of our finished fascia, the top side of our soffit, all around this framing, and down in here. And actually, this soffit cavity meets up with our wall cavity. So again, that's cavity line. And then this is an elevation line. So we're seeing the side of our 2x4 framing. And then we've got, you know what, I'm just going to mirror this. This will be easy. Midpoint between 2 points, between there and there. Gets us that piece of framing. This is cavity, so that ends there. And then this is material to material. And then that is our finish face, so that's our cut. And this line can get trimmed all the way back to here. So this beam is being supported, let me go up to my plan, at this corner by the wall and this corner. Now this wall could be a bearing wall, so you could actually have a beam spanning to this mid wall and then another beam here. I think I've sized it to take this entire opening. So that's that LVL right there. So this line actually gets trimmed like that. Oh wait, no, this line comes down. That becomes yellow because that's, actually that becomes green because that's cavity as well. Now in the basement, this is basically an unfinished basement. We don't have a ceiling down here. On the first floor, obviously we have a ceiling, so that becomes a cavity. And then what we're going to do is, oh, that gets trimmed, right? So our beam ends there, subfloor ends there. So our joist is going to go over our beam. And we're actually going to put a rim joist on there as well. We need a rim joist on there. So we got our rim joist in here. Let me get this line at the bottom of our stud wall there. Subfloor comes over to there. Drywall, or sorry, gypsum wallboard goes to our subfloor. Our rim joist goes to here. And there. So here's our joist, here's our rim joist. All of that sits on top of this beam. This video might run a little long because I just want to wrap this up. We're really close to getting finished. All right, let's fix some line weights here. Oh, sorry, that's cavity. So this should actually be to there, and then we can fill it that to that. And then that can be, although this is cavity too, so that gets green. Oops. Oop, that's not right, that's yellow. This is green. And then this line gets yellow. Because again, our cut goes around. We can hatch our cavity wall. I'm just going to paint that up there. We are going to extend, actually wait, we got to get our sheathing in there. Our sheathing will go to the outside of that. And then on the outside of our sheathing, we are going to offset 1.5 inches for a piece of nominal lumber or dimensional lumber. That is our nailer, or sorry, our ledger for our roof joists. So for now, I'm just going to trim all this to there. And how did I do this in the final? Let me think about this. I ran our sheathing down to that ledger. So I put the ledger in. The ledger, the top of the ledger is where the roof joist comes in. Oh, so I ran the ledger right up against there. I guess that would make sense because we don't need any sheathing in this area. So I did that wrong. Let's take that offset 1.5 inches from that face of the stud and trim that to there. That's where the ledger starts. Offset 5.5 inches. Trim that down to there. Now our sheathing, no, what is that? That's our furring. That will definitely not come down this far. Our sheathing comes down to the ledger along with our rigid insulation. And now we can trim these or extend these up. Get some line weights. Now again, that is cavity. I'll worry about that later. I might not even worry about that now because I just, like I said, want to get this wrapped up. Oops. Our joist would get cut there. And because of the angle, the joist will hang lower than the ledger, but that's fine. Because what we are going to do is we're going to hang them in with this joist hanger. So that's a metal, just like a I've been calling this a joist hanger. It's in this case it's a rafter hanger, but it is similar to a joist hanger. Oops, I can't get this in the correct place. So I'm going to move that down until it hits the bottom of my joist. There we go. So this is just like a joist hanger, except in this case it's a rafter hanger, and you can bend this bottom portion for pretty much any angle that you need to hang these rafters. Okay, that's in. What I'll do again is grab, let's go down to our window head, and we're just going to grab all of this, and we're going to copy that from the base point of our furring so that we can go right up to our furring line. Where is our furring? That's 1 inch. Okay, so that's furring. That's right there. And I'll just bring that up just above the wall. This blue line can overlap a little bit like that. And actually this furring would stop above the sheathing. And the sheathing would go right up against our rigid insulation. Hatch that rigid insulation. Again, I don't have the right hatch, so I'll match properties to the rigid insulation down here. Don't forget to hatch this rigid insulation here. And again, match properties. Now, we only have a couple more things to do, and that's pretty much hatch. So this beam, it's an LVL. It's a bunch of um, laminated veneers, as it says, LVL, laminated veneer lumber. So I am going to do this with a user-defined pattern. The angle is going to be 90, so the pattern's straight up and down. And my spacing is, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch. That sounds about right. Nice. That looks about right. Just a series of vertical lines showing that this is a series of laminates or veneers. So we'll get that on the right layer, the pattern layer. Finally, this entire cavity, this wall cavity as well as this soffit, needs to be insulated, because if this is the exterior and this is a roof, according to the energy codes in our zone 6 here in Delhi, or in Delaware County, this roof has to have, I believe it is an R49, which is a very high R value. So the only way to do that in if this soffit went all the way up and we only had this 2x6, we would not be able to get this thing insulated properly. We wouldn't have enough insulation to meet code. Now, I believe if you don't have enough vertical height, the code allows for an exception where you can do it at R30, and that's essentially what I've planned for here. And again, just kind of like the insulation here, with the spray foam. I like to, because the blown-in insulation in an attic, which is essentially what this space is, just sort of lays flat. So I do that again with a poly line, and I turn off my snaps and things, and I just kind of do that as a series of, I don't know if you can hear my mouse, but I'm clicking fairly rapidly as I move my mouse across, just kind of creating this look of, what that would look like if you just had a bunch of, cellulose is nothing more than basically torn up newspaper. Let me get my snaps back on, come down to here. Again, that's the edge of a hatch, so I'll make that on the pattern layer. And then I'm going to come in here and hatch this area, and this area, which is what that would fill. And then simply match properties to my cellulose. I've forgotten my joist insulation here. Well, that is going to be roughly the same height as this thing. So if I grab maybe that joint there, I can come up here, do that, although that's a little deeper here, so I'm going to bring that over to about there, trim that poly line back to here, and then in this case I'm going to call that cavity, and this is material against material, so this line gets brought back to there, this line gets extended out to there, same thing here. Then I can hatch this there, match properties using my honeycomb, and there we go. Explode this. Last thing to do, trim that back to there, and my section is essentially complete. Got a couple extra lines, a couple extra things out here. Get this placed on a viewport and I'm done. So that wraps up our wall section series of tutorials. Thanks for watching.